Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Tier 10 Soviet battleship Kremlin, a ship that is certainly quite monstrous to face in ranked. Before I start though, the winner of the Orkan giveaway has been posted on Twitter. Congratulations to the winner, and thank you everyone who took part, and of course thank you all for subscribing. We are getting very close to that 100k subscriber goal, which means we are getting very close to that significant giveaway. Moving on, Kremlin. One of the most terrifying ships to face in ranked. Not as bad as ranked as the carriers, of course. I mean, nothing can really be quite as bad. But the Kremlin certainly ranks up there, mostly because of healing perks. Now, Kremlin is already naturally absolutely brutally tanky. It's got multiple things that aren't even related to armor. Namely, have you ever looked at the broadside Kremlin? Have you seen how low the Kremlin sits in the water? I can show you guys in the port viewer comparing a broadside Kremlin to a broadside Yamato or a broadside Republic or any of these. Basically, it shows less than half of the broadside because everything it's so flat in the water. In fact, if you look at the broadside, you can see just how little, how small of a part of the ship actually peak up above the waterline. It is a very low ship. This already makes it a pretty hard ship to nail at long ranges. And then, of course, that the Kremlin's armor scheme is on a completely different level. We are talking icebreaker, 60 millimeters. The upper belt armor is 150 millimeters. The deck armor is 60 millimeters. The belt armor, which is what, 410, 430, it varies. It is so angled that at these ranges that they're shooting, I can give flat broadside, and there's basically no battleship that they have that is capable of citadeling me. A Kremlin, potentially, if you got the perfect broadside, could citadel me. That's my own ship, because if you weren't aware, the Kremlin also has the best penetration of all tier 10 battleships at range. No, that's not even a joke. From 15 kilometers onwards, I think it might even be from 14 kilometers onwards, it beats the Yamato, it beats the Thunder, it beats the Republic, ships that are known to have really good AP penetration. Well, the Kremlin has even better AP penetration than all of these at these ranges at 14 kilometers and longer. So the only one that I'm really afraid of is the Kremlin, but even when I shoot that Kremlin broadside, I need to be hitting his upper belt. And then, as I mentioned, because the Kremlin demonstrates such a small amount of upper belt, it's such a small target to actually hit. And if you do hit the superstructure, it's small, it's fairly thin, so overpens are common. That's why when people shoot the Kremlin, what they often see is shatters, bounces, and overpens. And very little damage. That's really the common thing that you see. So this incredible armor means that when you have healing buffs, which you get very often and very easily in ranked, well, you can just sail around and draw a stupid amount of attention, which is what I've been doing. In fact, look at my potential damage, 1.7 million. We are not even 4 minutes into this game. I've just been sailing, taking potshots, presenting broadside, and drawing the entire enemy team's attention to me. Every one of them, whenever they feel like shooting, they could shoot one of my cruisers, my vulnerable cruisers. They could perhaps try to go for a potshot on the DD, but this big battleship sailing around is just such a tempting target to shoot at, so they go for me instead. And this, of course, works perfectly for me. This is what you love to do in a Kremlin. Draw fire towards yourself. We're approaching 2 million potential. We're not even 5 minutes into the game. So, just drawing attention to myself and making them focus me. Now, even the gearing there, he pushed up, I guess wanted to get some torpedoes off potentially on me, or wanted to pick up a buff. Usually when a BB plays aggressive, it tends to make DDs also play aggressive because they really want to punish that BB. But you gotta remember that Kremlin Torpedo Belt is, of course, one of the best in the game. Kremlin Torpedo Belt is 46%, which means that, well, you're basically, well, poor long-range dispersion, by the way. Which means that even torpedoes really aren't that big of a threat to you. I mentioned it before, the dispersion, which is supposed to be poor, isn't actually poor. I went into this when I just talked about vertical dispersion, and the Kremlin has very low vertical dispersion, so the so-called poor long-range dispersion isn't actually that poor at all, and in fact the Kremlin is really effective at even mid to long ranges as well. Add in that it's 457mm guns with an amazing 30-second turret traverse, which allows me to easily switch targets to all these DDs that occasionally get spotted. But more importantly, 457s mean that you also overmatch all cruisers. So no cruisers can really tank you, with the exceptions of Moskvas and Stalingrads and such. And there's very little air drag on the shells. It's very easy to shoot the Kremlin guns. You take the same amount of lead regardless of, well, as you change distance, because, well, as you can see, 8-second travel time to 15 kilometers. It's very, very comfortable to use. What else is there? Your step, if there's a Venezia usually chunks most other BBs in the game, like Yamato hates Venezia, Republic hates Venezia, they take so much damage from it, but Venezia has 54mm sap penetration, like all 203mm sap penetration, and of course, because you got a 150mm upper belt and 60mm deck armor, well, you're basically completely immune to the sap damage. He can hit your superstructure and nose, and once those are saturated, well, that's pretty much the end of it. You gotta keep in mind that in rank this ship also scales exceptionally well with these healing buffs, because the healing buffs are percentage based, which means that they recover a missing percentage of your health, and Kremlin has the highest base health in the game at 108,000, so you get the biggest benefit out of these healing buffs. In fact, you can see I'm already healing. I'm approaching full HP again right here. I'm taking back more health than they can deal to me, even though I racked up what 2.3 million potential. So, and I'm just blapping these. Yoshino has 30mm armor. I of course overmatch it, so I don't care really if he angles against me or not. That's not to say that that's the only benefit. If someone does torp you, this thing has the best rudder shift of all silver tier 10 BBs. The best rudder shift. And this is while also having a pretty insane concealment of 13.4 kilometers. Now, why is 13.4 kilometers an absurd concealment? Well, something like Montana has 14. Something like the Kurfürst has 14.3. Republic, I think, has 14.1. Basically, everyone else is 14 or above 14, but Kremlin, that somehow has the highest health pool and the thickest armor, somehow has one of the best rudder shifts and an incredibly good concealment. Almost, well, 1 kilometer better, basically, than what the Kurfürst then does. Close to 1 kilometer better. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And of course, concealment is superbly useful if you need to disengage between fights. If you need to disengage to heal up, which happens quite often in these ranked games, well, that 13.4 kilometer concealment helps you significantly. Of all the things they've nerfed, over time on this Kremlin, they nerfed the dispersion a bit, but I mean, it's still a long-range monster. And they've nerfed the AA mount survival. But in general, it doesn't mean that carriers actually really want to go for you that much. AP bombers are still effective. Oh, Moskva, broadside. You don't get broadside in a Moskva. Oof, that's a triple citadel, and that's his entire health pool gone. So you don't really want to go for this ship regardless. You see I'm back up to health, back up to full health. They get some good AP volleys in towards the end. I'm pushing into the objective though, because, well, we really need to get the objective under our control, and if I can get a really strong position in the camp, there's not much they can do about it. Something I haven't touched upon is, of course, the damage con. You saw that I've got 2 fires. That was the first time all game that they managed to get 2 fires on me. I am, of course, running fire prevention, which means this is very rare. Once they do get those 2 fires on you, you can just pop your magical Soviet damage con. You only have 5 of them, which I honestly, I don't think I've ever run out of them. I just use them on double fires or flooding and fire, and you almost basically never run out of them. What makes these special is, of course, that, well, they only last 10 seconds, but they also only have a 34.2 second cooldown with the build that I'm running. So that means that even if you get set on fire instantly right after, you're only going to suffer from a 30-second penalty, and then you're going to have damage con up again. And if this wasn't enough, all this power in the terms of tankiness, concealment, maneuverability, armor, super fast damage con, well, I'm also running Kuznetsov. In fact, that's the only thing I've spent coal on. This is not my press account, this is my normal Russian account, because we can't play ranked with the press accounts. And I used coal to get Kuznetsov. So if at some point they would actually manage to get me low enough that there's a risk that I might die, well then Kuznetsov, the special Soviet captain, would kick in and he would damage con all my fires and floodings. He would give me a 30-second heal and he would give me a 20% boost to the dispersion of everyone shooting at me, or nerf to the dispersion. Basically they get poorer accuracy shooting me. So this thing is so ridiculously hard to take down. In fact, I can give you guys a Twitch clip. I'll post it in the comments below, and you can see me. That's a game where my team got completely steamrolled, and I'm tanking like 8 to 9 ships. And try to think of any other battleship or any other ship in the game that could tank so many ships for so long, and I'm basically just memeing while they're all shooting at me. Especially thanks to Kuznetsov proccing during that fight. Moskva, I know that his belt can bounce, so I aim for his upper belt to get those juicy penetrations. There is some overpens mixed in, but it's more important to get them. My team has actually managed to throw a bit, in the sense that we've lost 4 ships, and my team has lost a fair bit of map control, but I'm a Kremlin sitting in the center of the map, center of the objective control. I've said multiple times that I love playing central battleships positions, and the Kremlin is no different here. You get into this juicy center of the map position, and everyone else has to figure out how the hell do we dislodge that thing? How do we dislodge this thing that has 85k health, health is continually ticking up, basically can't be citadeled as long as he angled, takes very little damage from torps, takes no real HE damage. Like, how the hell do you get rid of this thing? Because they have to get rid of me, and every time they allow me to sit here, I of course shoot back with 457mm guns with god tier dispersion at close range, incredible penetration, and the ability to overmatch. This is very scary. And they have such huge issues dislodging me right now. My health bar is back up to green. They just, even with 3.8 million potential at this point, they can't do enough damage to this ship to actually dislodge me. AP comes in from the Kremlin. I was angled that he got bounces on the belt and overpens on the superstructure. But most of the time happens when people shoot you. Yoshino slows down and angles in, which means that I shoot too far in the front and only get overpens. But I'm okay, the Buffalo can take some pot shots at me, I don't really mind. We're gonna slow down and we're gonna take a shot at this Yoshino. Ideally, I use C to switch between turrets, so I get the back turret view to get a better perspective of what I'm shooting at, and I aim straight for his nose. Yoshino has, even if I don't get citadels through his nose, that overmatch capacity means that if all of the 7 shells that I land, every single one of them overmatches his armor, and they all penetrate because he's angled, so we did like, what, 25k damage to this angled so-called battle cruiser. And, well, he's also recovering health, but obviously won't be anywhere enough to survive Kremlin firepower. Going for the next volley. The front turrets actually clip the island, so I don't quite get the kill, but the Shimakaze torpedo finishes him off. 4.2 million potential. We're still just sitting in the middle of the cap, and one by one they're trying to push in, they're trying to figure out how do we dislodge this monster from the objective. Because if I wasn't here, these radar cruisers could push in and they could maybe deal with the rest of my team. The BBs could push in, they could do a lot of things. But with me sitting in this central objective, it is so hard to deal with. This is something I don't understand, that I've been seeing a lot in ranked, and that's battleships sitting super far back, full HP, and not helping. No, if you get an opportunity to get into the objective, that is the most terrifying spot for a battleship to be. Because how the hell do you deal with this guy? Like, these close islands, you can try to YOLO torpedo, of course, if you got a DD, but it's not an easy task because, well, your team sees you go in most of the time, most of them at least go, hey, we should probably go there as well. There's a goddamn BB sitting in the cap. Of course, that does expect your teammates to use their monitors, look at their minimap and pay attention, which might be a bit generous of an assumption of the current state of ranked teammates, but it does happen occasionally. And in this case, Kremlin, he tries to push to Georgia, and I got his broadside. And at this point blank range, the penetration should be more than enough to punch through to his citadel. Even then though, most of the shells landed, well, I got overpens and pens before I scored that citadel. And that is, finally, the Kremlin, enemy Kremlin dead, and now we have significant map and cap control. Donskoy pushes up towards the Salem, so I'm just gonna swing around and start taking pot shots at him as well. There's been a carrier in this game, have you seen me be particularly bothered by all the AA nerfs Wargaming has given to this Kremlin? Well, they haven't actually nerfed the AA values, they've nerfed the AA survivability. But with the healing buffs, it's hard to really tell how much AA has the Kremlin lost. And that's why many carriers choose to not go for them, because, well, it's hard to tell. Has he got an HE spammed? Has he maybe just eaten a torpedo and he's got full AA? Like, I don't know. Better not risk my planes. And that's one of the things that makes the ship so powerful. Worth noting, by the way, that even though I've got way over 4 million potential this game, the lowest I'm about to go this entire match will come when this Montana comes around the island. He's giving me flat broadside, and I shoot right at his waterline, and I think RNGesus himself decides that this Montana is my protected disciple, and you shall not land any shells on his citadel, and somehow all the shells just disappear. And he shoots me back, and he gets me down to 56k. That's the lowest I went all game. Just to give you an idea of the tankiness of this ship. Even though I've been absorbing, well, just look at the potential, I've been absorbing 4.5 million worth of shells, I've been sitting in the center of the objective half the game, that is the lowest they managed to get this thing. Kremlin tankiness is so completely ridiculous. And this is where I get the final confirmation, by the way, that this Montana is absolutely RNGesus blessed. I go nose in, and the nose in armor on this Kremlin turrets is 550 millimeters, and I point right at his guns, and even then, when he shoots me with his front guns, he somehow manages to break one of the turrets. I have no idea how he managed to break through that sloped armor, but RNGesus truly loved him. I don't think I've ever lost a Kremlin turret in the past, but this guy managed to do it somehow, so props to however the hell that worked. The DD, I'm already outside of the cap since I went to kill off this guy, so the DD, I can't leave the Östergötland cap at while I'll go chase down the CV. Even if the CV did want to kill me, like let's say, I mean I've lost a fair bit of AA at this point, absolutely. Even if he did want to kill me, that's 2 heals, 2 damage cons, Kuznetsov, and all that armor and all that damage reduction plus fire prevention that he has to work through. He's got absolutely no way of killing me before I rush him down. There's just no way to kill a Kremlin in that time. So, Kremlin is a monster. A well-played Kremlin in ranked is such a pain to deal with. Now, there were some ships that were quite good at it. For example, IFHE Hindenburg used to be really good at farming Kremlins because they were so very confident in that 60mm plating that they kind of overextended, they pushed too far compared to any other BB, and then you could farm them. But of course, Wargaming made the IFHE rework, which also made IFHE Hindenburg very questionable. Well, more questionable. I still like it, but the huge reduction in fire chest does hurt it quite a bit when it comes to dealing with ships like that. So, I mean, most other battleships, they suffer from HE spam to some extent. Even Kremlin, even Gross-Kurfürst. Gross-Kurfürst has the 50mm deck armor, which means the likes of Yoshinos, Azumas, Hindenburgs, Stalingrads, basically all these different forms or Alaskas, all these different forms of HE shells can penetrate that. Even SAP can penetrate that. But the Kremlin, because instead of having 50, has 60mm armor, it doesn't take that damage. It simply doesn't take that damage. And that dispersion. I only have 2 turrets. I would still argue that I'm a significantly better Republic in my current state, even with my 2 turrets, because at least my guns can hit something. I really haven't been a fan of the Republic lately. Maybe it's the change in the meta, or maybe RNGesus just doesn't like me, but that Republic ship has fallen off hard. I aim, of course, I can't aim for his center ship yet, because I'm afraid of hitting his deck armor, which will easily bounce my AP, so I'm hitting his stern, because I know that part can be overmatched, and I can deal significant damage to it. Only when I get closer will I switch to his upper belt, because I know I can overmatch that as well, and hopefully I'm close enough that I'm no longer going to be hitting that tanky deck armor. I also don't want to go for any sort of angled citadel, which will also probably bounce my AP. Shells look pretty good. I score 4 pens, another 10k, but we are ticking out on points so quickly that the game does end. That additional turret sure would have helped me here, but not quite enough. Game ends. 325,000 damage, but this game, I didn't even really focus on the damage I was dealing, more on the sheer amount of damage I was absorbing. I did get Confederate and High Caliber, but I also got Dreadnought and Fireproof. Basically, shot down 11 planes, 114 shells, only 1 kill, 5 citadels, got a buff seized, but that doesn't tell the whole story, does it? In fact, team score wise does start peeking in on a bit of the whole story, namely the hits on the DDs and just the sheer amount of control that I brought to this team by being that unmovable bastion in the center of the map. 3.5k base XP. Detailed report wise, well, that's when it gets somewhat amusing. Damage received 216,000. Note that the lowest I went all this game was 56,000. I didn't even go below half health. I never went below half health, and I still had Kuznetsov remaining to bail me out in case something went very poorly. The HE 140, 49k, very little HE damage, and the AP, even the AP, considering it was a lot of battleship shooting me, not very impressive damage that either. Fires, those that I allowed to take single fires are such a non-issue in ranked sprint because, well, you got those healing buffs that basically tick away all the damage that the fires are dealing. Shot move, only AP. You can expert load HE if you get good opportunities, but most of the time just taking a pot shot with AP is worth it because you can deal so much damage with it. And this, finally, of course, potential damage, 4.6 million. And this was the reason why I like this vid is because it shows how effortlessly this ship tanked that 4.6 million. At no point was I even close to dying. At no point did I feel in any sort of risk. At no point did I need my special captain to bail me out or anything similar. No, this was just casually sailing around, giving far more broadside than you can in any other battleship, and just getting away with it because we are playing the Stalinium-blessed battleship Kremlin. Kinda ridiculous if you ask me, but hey, what do I know? Let me show you guys my recommended build for the Kremlin. Right. Before I start, actually, let me show you what I was talking about there. I mentioned that the broadsides. I wanna highlight this since I did mention it. Do you see how much broadside this thing presents? Do you see how small this profile is? And then we compare it to, well, we can compare it to Korfu's profile. See how much more? Once again, we go back to Kremlin. It gets much worse when you start looking at the likes of Yamato. Basically twice as much broadside to shoot compared to Kremlin's. And Republic, same thing. Jeez, like these things sit so much higher in the water than the Kremlin. And this is not something you can really look at the stats and see. This is something you just experience by fighting it. And add in, of course, that the armor on this side is that incredibly sloped belt armor that you're never gonna citadel at range, and 150mm plating, followed by angled 60mm deck armor, and then a thin superstructure that's easily overpenetrated. This is why when you shoot broadside Kremlins, you get shatters, bounces, overpens, and quite rarely do you get those juicy penetrations. The armor scheme is just superior. It does have a 32mm nose, but once again, once this thing is saturated, there's no more damage to farm from it. And of course, if you are a Yamato, you're not going to be able to citadel this thing from the front. It's just not going to happen. And yeah, concealment, of course, 13.4, as I mentioned, very, very good. Maneuverability, the rudder shift of 16.3 is the best silver rudder ship. The Montana sits at 22, I think the Yamato sits at 22. Conqueror? Even the Conqueror is 17.3, it's the Thunder that gets it, so yeah. No, the Kremlin actually has the best rudder shift, even though it's this tanky and it has so much health. So, really in a class of its own when in many of these values. Moving on. Premium damage con premium heal, no reason not to. Run the second auxiliary armaments mod to help with losing all your AA. You're still gonna lose it pretty quickly. I would say you never lose your turrets, but somehow that Montana actually managed to knock out this turret, even though I was angled the guns like this. I have no idea how he managed to knock this turret out, but somehow he did it. Blessed by Iron Jesus. It's never actually happened before in a Kremlin, so well done. Additional tankiness, better dispersion, more additional tankiness. Once again, even if your biggest weakness is fires and flooding, I guess, and you can mitigate them significantly, so why wouldn't you? Concealment, and finally faster reload on the main guns, which gives you a juicy 29 seconds. Note that even with this reducing your turret traverse, it's still an incredibly impressive 30.4 seconds, which I'm pretty sure is like far better than any of the other silver BBs. What is the so-called brawler's code for turret traverse? 39. Okay, it's 10 seconds better than that almost. Sorry, 9 seconds better. Okay, never mind then. Yeah, so you can easily slot that, and you don't have to worry about the turret traverse. Captain build wise, obviously Kuznetsov. If you have access to him, no reason not to run Kuznetsov because of this talent. This is will to victory. I mean, both of them are good. If you manage to blap someone first blood, you get an extra damage con and extra heal with emergency reserves. Very, very useful. But even if you don't manage to proc this, will to victory is so easy to activate. All you need to do is take damage. Your ship falls below 10%, which in case of the Kremlin is your ship health falls to about 10k health. Then it procs. It starts healing you for 30 seconds. It increases the dispersion of shells fired at your ships by enemies by 20%, and it extinguishes fires, remove instances of flooding, and repairs damaged modules, aka it's a free damage con, and you can play around that. Basically, someone sets you on fire and you got 14k health, you can use damage con, and then if he hits you again and gets a fire, it's gonna proc will to victory, which is gonna damage con it as well. So like it's very easy to play around this talent, and it's the best talent in the game for that reason. Build wise, standard BB build, priority target, adrenaline rush, superintendent, fire prevention, concealment expert. Normally I'd go expert marksman at this point, but you don't need it on Kremlin, so just go to improved jack of all trades for the minus 10%, which once again synergizes really well as well. Expert loader, and finally expert marksman with the last 2 points, mostly because there's not a whole lot better to spend those points on. Flag wise, I think reduction in fire, reduction in flooding, increased healing, faster consumables, speed, AA, secondaries, and ramming flag is always nice to have, because once again you can quite easily ram other tier 10 BBs because your rudder shift is better than theirs, so if it comes down to it, you can pull off a ram pretty comfortably against most of these ships. That was my ranked, well, that's the normal build I use in Kremlin for randoms, and it's just as effective in ranked. In fact, it's even more effective because this ship is such an absolute monster. Not as strong as DD's. I do want to highlight that. Even with how ridiculous this ship is in ranked, the DD's just carry so much weight in ranked. Because not for the reason that you might expect, it's mostly because the average DD seems so prone on suiciding. So if you play a DD and you don't suicide in the first 5 minutes, well, your win rate is probably going to be 60%. Because good job, you didn't suicide. Now you can be out there, you can be scouting, you can be capping, and you can be killing enemy DDs, and your team will probably win the match just because of that. In fact, I played Kremlin until I got annoyed, and then I played Daring, and I ranked out easily with Daring. So Kremlin is fun and powerful and ridiculous, but DDs carry the show, unless of course you play carrier, in which case carriers are by far the alpha predator and the best ship in the game, but everyone already knew that. As always, thank you guys for watching, thank you for following, thank you for subscribing. I'll talk to you guys next time.